What is up, folks? Eddie Ads here, your intelligence officer for the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. No one doing more more broad or extensive coverage of this trial, I believe, than myself. I think there's a lot of people who have specialties when it comes to the coverage of this trial. You got Joe Neerman being a New York litigator, bringing that expertise to it. Matthew Lee of Inner City Press, obviously having that insider access and live tweeting ability that only he has, I believe. Maybe Classfield does as well. But I have been getting the photojournalism stuff. I've been doing the live updates uh, as they are allowed to be. You have to go outside the courtroom, as you may know, with your phone. So I want to also offer well, at least request a pardon from you guys because I was supposed to do this summary yesterday, and that did not end up happening. And the reason for that is because I gotta be careful what I say here, guys. I was not feeling well. Let's put it that way. I was more so an exhaustion thing. I think it's because I haven't gotten as much sleep as maybe I'm used to, and as you may or may not know, a decreased or not getting sufficient sleep suppresses your immune system. So that could have been what happened, but my body was not allowing me to do a whole lot yesterday. So that was unfortunate, but I'm feeling a lot better today. Day two of jury deliberation is in full swing. I predicted yesterday that I could see this wrapping up by 3 p.m. or so today. That was nothing more than a guess. But I want to bring up the fact, too, that 3 days were taken off last week, that weird week we had where we started on Thursday and only went to Friday before the defense rested. And then Saturday was the charging conference. So this issue of trying to get this done before Christmas break could have been avoided were it not for that. And it does seem like they are trying to squeeze this in at the last hour. And another idea I saw brought up was the appeal of a possible conviction based on the idea that the jury rushed their decision because they did, in fact, want to get home to their families for Christmas break, which could have been avoided. But let's talk about closing arguments. I've mentioned them briefly in my Twitter updates and elsewhere, but Allison Moe, she was the one presenting the closing arguments for the prosecution. I thought she had some decent rhetoric. Writing certainly was pretty good. Her delivery was not the best. Her oratory is very average, I would say. And then Menninger, I thought, although slightly better delivery, the points she was making were not as great, and she was very bland as well. Although towards the end, she did make some great points, pointing out to the prosecution's lack of witnesses, lack of evidence, which is something many people have discussed and brought up, myself included. So that was I think, a good point by Menninger. But I thought Maureen Comey kind of saved the day for the prosecution. She had a very good rebuttal for the prosecution. Very emotional, I would say, because thus far, up to the closing arguments, I really was not that impressed with Maureen Comey. Although, caveat there, I did not see her redirect of Caroline, which I heard one lawyer describe as being art. So with that exception, I'd seen pretty much everything else that Comey has produced, but that closing argument rebuttal was the best work that I've seen so far from Comey. Even at one point, I could feel myself affected emotionally by her oratory. But let's go over this. Christine Maxwell and Ian Maxwell showed up for the closing arguments. Which is significant because thus far it's only been Isabel Maxwell, who you may have seen in my videos, or Kevin Maxwell. Isabel's been there, I think, every single day. Kevin Maxwell has been there almost every single day. There were a few days where he didn't show up, maybe two or so. But also noteworthy, Ghislaine was the last to stand at the start of the day at the very first All Rise, which was at least the second time I've noticed that happening. And I saw Ian and Ghislaine interacting before proceedings started. And a couple quotes I wanted to share. This is from Alison Moe again, who presented the closing arguments for the prosecution. Ghislaine Maxwell was dangerous. She was a grown woman who preyed on little kids. Maxwell was a sophisticated predator who knew exactly what she was doing. And this these closing arguments, I saw Ghislaine Maxwell the most that I've seen her so far this trial, in terms of being fidgety, nervous. She couldn't keep her hands still. She was constantly taking notes and flipping papers during Allison Moe's opening statement for the closing arguments for the prosecution. I don't know what she was writing down or what papers she was flipping, but she certainly wanted to give the appearance that she was doing something productive while Allison Moe was doing her closing arguments. And she went over several reasons for why Maxwell is guilty, bringing up the advertisement document from Maxwell's computer, the fact that Maxwell and Epstein were partners, and she brought up the house manager. Again, the list of oils and lotions, also one of those documents found on Maxwell's computer. Another quote, Epstein liked underage girls. He liked to touch underage girls. Maxwell knew it. And I think I wrote this down on my own accord. See nothing, hear nothing, say nothing. As part of the house manual there. And really disappointing because I was on track to get inside the physical courtroom itself there on the third floor. I want to say it's room 318 or 313. But strangely enough, and I want to ask Marlon Ettinger about this because he got in one day 2 weeks ago on the Tuesday before the prosecution rested their case, as far as going after Maxwell. He is not part of a large media outlet like Fox, MSNBC, BBC, etc. Nor am I, but I don't know that he was asked for documentation to prove that he was official media. But I was, and unfortunately, I cleaned out my backpack before the night before, and I didn't have a business card because I'm working also loosely with Chris Tonti Harris of the Rundown Live, and because of that, because I didn't have a little square piece of paper, I was disallowed from entering the courtroom. And yeah, the marshal, he was definitely just trying to intimidate me. I thought I handled it pretty well, but they also this guy also violated HIPAA, as far as I know. Another marshal told us on the first day we are not allowed to ask you if you have gotten jabbed, but nonetheless, this guy did. He asked me that. So they were really, as far as I could tell, they were looking for any reason to disallow me from getting in. I think I made quite a splash so far in this trial. I have no qualms in saying that. I've been heavily, heavily suppressed, more so than anyone else here, I would say, by far. And I have no qualms about the attention that I've been getting this trial. And nonetheless, it was okay that I didn't get in. I got there early, and what made me feel pretty bad was the fact that this young lady gave up her spot, which she paid for. She's like, "You can have my spot," because I got there early, but not early enough. I got there around 7:30. I want to say no, it was. I'm sorry, it was even earlier. It was like 6:45, and there was already probably 18 people there or so. And this who I know her. She goes by Jagia. She just gave me her spot, and as far as I know, she's gotten in. But again, pretty interesting stuff there. There's definitely a different um, standard of treatment for people who are not part of the mainstream media. Who, by the way, on Saturday, I don't think any of them showed up, as far as I can tell. And likewise on Monday, You can see there's a back row where there's reservations for them, and largely empty. It's largely empty. We were actually talking about that. I was talking about that last night with Kriston T. Harris of the Rundown Live, also from Wisconsin. They get paid no matter what to be there, and they don't show up. And I made that point on Kriston's live stream the other night. Is when you're independent, you have to produce results because you don't get paid no matter what. You don't get paid just to stand around like these other people do. So let's continue here. Pictures were shown to the jury of Maxwell and Epstein. It was pointed out that all victims came from single mother households and that Epstein and Maxwell chose their victims carefully. Make no mistake, selecting these girls was predatory behavior. Allison Moe. So again, I thought the writing was good, but she's not a very good speaker. I have to say, Miss Moe, you should improve that. Let me just check some comments here. Thanks for checking in, folks. Maxwell touched these girls' bodies. It's not an accident. It happened again and again and again. At one point during the closing arguments for the prosecution, Maxwell put a hand up to cover her face, her right hand. And I noticed that Kevin Maxwell is allowed to drink water in the courtroom. So I don't know why that is, because we aren't allowed to do that. Quote, by the way, you know that's true because you've seen Maxwell topless by the pool, too. Maxwell would show her how Jeffrey liked to be massaged. And at one point in time, I saw Polyuka examining his fingernails. So I thought that was kind of interesting. None of this was normal. It was deeply disturbing. Also relayed and reviewed were highlights of Jane's testimony, including the vibrator being mentioned, and as well as the fact she flew both commercially and privately. Quote, he would ask me to squeeze his nipples really hard. And there's more to that quote, but anyways. You knew Jane has been in this room because it's exactly how she remembered. Also from Allison Moe there. Bringing up Jane's flight log entry to Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, which is where they arrested Epstein for the second time. And the DMV testimony was to prove Jane's age, as well as the age of the other Jane, whose name I accidentally said the other night on a roundtable by accident. Delayed disclosure concept of Lisa Rocchio, whereby sexual assault victims, will not disclose their abuse until years later, typically. And the younger the abuse happens, the longer that time period tends to be. So kind of going at the why did you wait so long to bring this up argument that the defense has been using. They're also less likely to tell anyone at all the closer they are to the perpetrator. The jury can consider victims' testimonies as corroborating, which is something I would hope they would do because Caroline and Sean's were highly corroborative. And Jane never testified seeing or knowing Michelle Healy or Eva Dubin. The defense left questioning vague. Allison Moe said, you should find her guilty on counts 1 to 4 if you believe Jane. And the lie about the scholarship or summer program in New Mexico was brought up, whereby Annie Farmer thought that she was going to basically a pre-college summer program, which obviously wasn't the case. Quote, she was trying to get Annie to touch Epstein. Speaking on Ms. Maxwell there. They also spoke about Caroline being asked to travel. And remember, Caroline did not travel because she herself declined. She said, no, I'm too young to do that. Also evidence of Virginia Roberts traveling with the dark side duo, Epstein and Maxwell. Government Exhibit 802, invoice for package sent to Caroline when she was just 15 years old, which is why Tracy Liddell, I think her name was the FedEx paralegal, was brought to the stand one day. That was actually that Thursday. That was very weird because we ended so early because one of the attorneys got sick. Also mentioned was the list of the names of the masseuses, all names being female, and notes like mom, dad, or parents next to some of the names. Why would one person need so many masseuses? Why would you have in quotation marks or parentheses next to the phone numbers words like mom, dad, or parents? Well, that's probably because they are children that you are contacting. Also mentioned flight logs with the 17-year-old Virginia Roberts. I also noticed that all the siblings of the Maxwells present, Kevin, Ian, Christine, and Isabel, who are the twins, appeared to be simultaneously writing on notepads, which I did. I did take note of. Uh, Let me just look at comments here, folks. Awesome Addie says Maria Farmer. Please go subscribe to Maria Farmer on YouTube at Artistic Whistleblower and on Twitter at Artistic Whistleblower. And I retweet her pretty regularly, so you can find her under my Twitter as well. Do you stream on Twitch only, or do you just stream on Twitch? No, I do not. We are on Rockfin right now, which is where I'm sending people principally. It is really fantastic because they are pro free speech. They are pro getting creators paid. You're able to tip people even after a live stream's ended, which I think is great. But we're also on the usual Facebook and YouTube. And I don't send people to YouTube anymore. If you want to find me on YouTube, you can go ahead and do that. But I actually don't even send people there anymore because it's kind of a waste of our time. But Rockfin, my work, should always be up there. I don't think they're going to take it down. That's their whole idea. And normally we would be on Twitter, but as I mentioned, if you've been following with me throughout this trial, pretty much the second day that I got here, or the second day of the trial, I want to say it was second or third day, I mysteriously was unable to stream to Twitter after my Twitter account blew up. So I've contacted them, and we've had a couple emails corresponding about the troubleshooting of that live streaming issue. I haven't heard back from them in at least a week, so we'll see if that comes back or not. But if, God forbid, something happens to my Twitter account, that is why I'm trying to send people to my Telegram account. Link in the description box / show notes, t.me/one Addy ads for the best updates. Maxwell was given $30+ million by Jeffrey Epstein, per the evidence that was brought into this trial. $18.3 million in a single transaction in 2002, $5 million in 2007, $7.4 million for a total of $30.7 million. A decade aiding and abetting Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. Quote, Allison Moe, prosecution. Ghislaine Maxwell recruited Virginia Roberts at Mar-a-Lago, and in 2001, Roberts brought Caroline to the Palm Beach house when she was just 14. Maxwell, I noticed on Monday, was drinking Fiji water. So she was drinking better water than I was, I would say. Government Exhibit 606 was the House Management Manual. Jane told Ghislaine Maxwell she was on flights with her and that Maxwell helped to arrange travels. No requirement for abuse to have occurred or that the accused be an abuser for enticement to travel. Rather, it is in the intent. So that is why, actually, partially, I pegged that count as being the most likely to get get a conviction. And again, I'm speaking specifically on the scope of this trial. Highly secretive, no call-in line, very little evidence or witnesses, and this weird kind of scheduling games that they're playing with everyone by making this kind of ending today / this week, kind of not, and just making it tough on the jury. I gotta say, it seems like they're trying to rush them before Christmas, as I mentioned at the beginning of our podcast today. And a commercial sex act being defined as a sex act in exchange for money with regards to the charges. Maxwell would pay the money herself sometimes. And for the federal, I believe it's trafficking acts, there has to be a minimum effect on interstate commerce, which includes the FedEx package being sent from New York City and the massage table being made in California, which the first one I see is much more plausible, much more likely to be fit under that definition than the massage table being created in California. But I have to say, I really want the book thrown at this woman. So hopefully the jury was persuaded by that. And that's the thing, too. I want to reiterate the prosecution won the day on Monday. No doubt. I think no doubt. Afterwards, a lot of us are speaking. It's surprising. I think Maureen Comey surprised a lot of people. I think Menninger surprised a lot of people insofar as people thought she was going to do better. And that's why, after the fact, I would say that Christian Everdale should have done the closing arguments. But this is a case of women being sex crimes against women, right? So, well, technically not, because there's no sex crimes for Maxwell, but that's the scope of the context of the trial, right? Generally speaking. And so I think the defense was thinking it's better to have a woman doing a lot of the cross examinations and closing arguments. But I have to say, Everdale, I think, would have done a much better job for the defense than Menninger, who was just kind of a letdown, I got to say. She really, like I said, Alison Moe wasn't the most exciting, but she made some great points. But Comey really stuck it. She stuck the landing, I got to say. And they also went over the 1, 3, and 5 conspiracy counts. This case isn't about Bugs Bunny. It isn't about stop signs. It's about sexual abuse. And this was when Alison Moe was speaking about the quote unquote star witness for the defense, Elizabeth Loftus, addressing the money argument by pointing out that money received by Ghislaine Maxwell from Jeffrey Epstein, that $30 million. And as I mentioned with Loftus, bringing up the Bugs Bunny study, probably to shed light on the nature of her work and make it seem ridiculous. But I thought the best point, again, was the book that was brought up, Witness for the Defense. Closing argument by Menninger. And I want to say this too. On both sides, the prosecution and the defense, the scope of this trial has been way too focused on Epstein than it has been on Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell is not Jeffrey Epstein. That's literally what Menninger said. With some weird quotes, she mentioned something about unknown hairstyles. Again, a little bizarre there, but a great point I think that Menninger brought up. 40 photographs were used by the prosecution from the FBI's raid. And Menninger asks, where are the other 37,960 photographs? That's a great question. Lots of us mention that too, not just the photographs, but the video, the blackmail, everything else. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. There you go. That's classic defense jargon right there. Jeffrey Epstein died and everyone lawyered up, said Menninger. You don't need a lawyer to talk to the FBI. Which, again, that seems very weak to me. You're a fool if you talk to any federal agent or any law enforcement without a lawyer. Menninger is trying to make it seem like that means you're guilty. No. Especially coming from the defense. Manipulation. The tough questions weren't asked by the government, so they had to be asked by us. End quote. She brought up post-event suggestion. The government also promised you an array of witnesses, another promise that they broke. Quote, there was no culture of silence. You just got the sound of silence, ladies and gentlemen. End quote. Quote, you didn't see a schoolgirl outfit. End quote. I didn't get the whole quote there. Partial quote. Maria Farmer introduced her sister to Jeffrey Epstein. End quote. She also brought up the amount of money that Jane's family had to pay to go to Interlaken, $12,000 per summer for 3 kids, Jane and her 2 brothers, trying to shed light on the idea that this family is more well off, more well to do than what was initially let on during court. Another quote, Jane is wrong, wrong, wrong on many, many points. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 words there in the sentence. One of them used 3 times, one of them used twice. 3 wrongs and 2 manys there from Menninger. So that was interesting. No testimony from the townhouse workers. Again, I think that's a great point by the defense. That's one email the government brought you for a 10-year conspiracy. Where is Virginia Roberts? Laura Menninger asked this. This whole trial. I don't know. There's a lot of confusing stuff going on here, but Menninger brings up some great points here. I have to say, as lame as like the first half of her closing arguments were, the second half was pretty good. If she can corroborate Carolyn, you'd think they might have had her come and do that. Menninger there referring to Virginia Roberts Giuffre. Shelley Lewis, Shelley Lewis, Selena Middlefort, ex-girlfriends of Epstein. I need to look into, and I do want to get the transcripts. I want to give one more shout out to Kriston T. Harris of the Rundown Live. He's the only guy here, to my knowledge, who has paid the money for a lot of the transcripts. Not all of them, because there's an average of 3,000 notes per day, about $1.30 or $1.25 per page. That's a lot of money. But he did use some of his listener funds to get those out there. So a shout out to him. So one thing I noticed too is there was a lot more leeway in the closing arguments, with the prosecution even making a post hoc objection before rebuttals, which is overruled, complaining about the scope of what the defense was addressing. And Nathan basically was saying, well, I don't want to misquote, but there's a lot more leeway. I'm not a lawyer, but there's a lot more leeway in closing arguments. They can bring up stuff that was objected to and sustained during examinations in the closing arguments. So that 30 million is not just that was a great quote. I didn't get the whole thing, but Comey said something to the effect that it's not just money to pay you off money. It is we molested kids together money. It is we molested kids together money. So some great quotes from the both sides, I would say, in the closing arguments. Quote, the government is not required to use any particular investigative techniques. Steph is speaking out everything. No age limit for the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, which is brought up as well. You don't have to be a minor to apply to the Epstein Victim Compensation Fund. So if people have questions before I sign off here, I'm about to head out for the day. Again, these last couple days have been kind of weird. Again, yesterday I was very much out of it. I feel much better today. I just I think my body was just telling me you need to rest, I think, for a bit, because I tried to get up and get going, but it just wasn't working for me. But today I'm doing much better. I'm going to be doing a infield report with Kriston T. Harris of the Rundown Live at the United Nations headquarters before we head to the courthouse for the afternoon. So be on the lookout for that. Updates to come on Twitter. Stay frosty, folks. We'll see everybody next time.